Welcome everyone to New South Wales DBI Dairy webinar number 5, Technology Adoption on Australian and New Zealand Dairy Farms, Current and Future Adoption. My name is Nicolas Lyons. I am the Development Officer, Robotic Milking Systems within the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, and I will be your presenter today. My position is a national role supporting technology adoption on Australian dairy farms with a particular focus but not limited to robotic milking systems. As a bit of a background, I hold a Bachelor of Ag Science and a PhD in Veterinary Science, both with a strong orientation in dairy science and production. Basically all my work in life for the last 10 plus years, I have been involved in the dairy industry, both in Australia and overseas, and always working in public or private organizations, trying to help farmers adopt technology and make better use and efficiency of that technology that they adopt. Today's presentation was delivered at the first International Precision Dairy Farming Conference that was held in the Netherlands in late June 2016. So a month ago, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend that conference together with some other Sydney University students, as well as some researchers from Tasmania and a couple of dairy farmers. The conference was a mixture of science and practice that brought together more than 300 people all around the world that are interested in applied precision dairy farming. In this case, I would like to thank the co-authors of this work, Dr. Callum Eastwood and Brian De La Rue from Dairy NZ in New Zealand, and Associate Professor Kendra Kerisk from Future Dairy, the University of Sydney. So the four of us put together this paper that was submitted to the conference and accepted, and I delivered this presentation at the conference. So I would like to start with a bit of the trends in the dairy industry that we see at the moment. This is basically focused in Australia and New Zealand, but we tend to see the same in basically all around the world. The herds are getting bigger. There's less herds, less dairy farms in the world, but those herds are getting bigger. The cows are producing every time more milk, and it's very difficult to attract or retain staff to work on dairy farms. Dairying is a job that involves a lot of time and a lot of staff, and the pressures or the profitability is being squeezed. So farmers are looking at ways to address this constant pressure that they have in the dairy industry to be sustainable and profitable as they move into the future. So how will farmers face these challenges, or how are farmers facing these challenges or these pressures that we see all around the world? Basically, there are many options available. Different farmers choose to solve these pressures or address these issues in different ways. Some of them are thinking about technologies, some of them are thinking about employing staff and different skills, some are looking at technology, some are just not doing anything and seeing what's happening out there to take a decision of what they should do to address these issues. And we see basically that a lot of farmers are looking at technologies as a way of addressing this issue. And I say that technology has three main aims. Number one, it can replace human labor, and it's what we traditionally call automation. So it's something that is done by a human person conventionally. We replace the human labor in that task, and we automate that task. The second aim that technology can have is capture data. So sensors or technologies deployed on farm to capture a lot of data. But what I say is we need to transform that data in actual information that provides insights to address the third aim that technology can provide, that is allowing for better decisions on farm. So basically technology can have these one or more than one of these three aims, either replace human labor, either capture data, or allow for better decisions. So what have we seen so far of adoption on farm? Basically, not much is known about choices and future adoption of technology. So what are dairy farmers in Australia looking at as they move into the future? What have they adopted so far? There is some studies being done or that have been conducted overseas, and there was the cow time project conducted in Australia, but that was a couple of years ago. But there's not much what is known about what farmers are looking as they move into the future. When we look at similar work that has been done overseas, one work in New Zealand by Paul Edwards in 2014, we see that those that he classified as fast adopters of technology tend to be farmers with rotary dairies, larger farms, and more cows per farm. On the other hand, we tend to, from a survey conducted in the US by Borchers and Bewley in 2015, we see that the higher adoption of technologies have been in the areas of measuring daily milk yield, cow activity, and mastitis. And what we see is that having this information accessible would enable better research, development, extension, and education investment at an industry level to cater what farmers are thinking as they move into the future and where the current pressures being held on farm. So what did we do? There was two pieces of work conducted in Australia and in New Zealand. They were not part of a joint project, just for the purpose of this paper and this presentation. We've collated both the results together, but one was a work done in Australia. It was a survey that was done in 2015. It was internet-based and voluntary nature. So we designed the survey online and we distributed with a snowball effect this survey. So some of you might have received this survey. It was a link. The farmer or the service provider entered into that survey and they were able to answer a series of questions, up to 32 questions, depending on each respondent's profile. Whereas in New Zealand in 2013, they conducted a telephone survey and on average the surveys lasted 15-16 minutes and there was a criteria or a size cutoff for farmers to participate in that survey. They had to have at least 100 dairy cows and operating either a rotary or a herringbone parlour. So walkthroughs or robotic milking systems were not eligible to participate in this survey. Basically, this survey captured between 3 and 4% of the industry farms, and they were designed by multidisciplinary teams and sent out, and the answers that are collated in this presentation only pertain to either farm managers or owners and operators. And we did so because we believe these are the ones that have the decision-making power on farm, and we wanted to think that if they had the decision-making power on farm and they would be able to drive or change the decision of investment on farm, we should try to see what are they thinking at the moment. So I'll split the answers in both and then I'll bring them together at the end. So the results of Australia, we gathered almost 170 responses from every dairy region and from every farm size. Out of the dairy sheds that answered this survey, basically 3/4 were herringbone dairies and 1/4 was rotary dairy sheds. When we look at how old were the dairy shed, and that starts giving some insight of what we see in the industry, roughly 3/4 of the participants had dairy sheds that were commissioned more than 10 years ago, and more than half of them were commissioned more than 15 years ago. So this means that there is sheds that have been installed for a long period of time that have already been or undergone the depreciation factor of the survey, but they're still operating in the industry. So, and the other thing is that 60% of these dairies did not have any upgrade within the last 5 years. So we start thinking, what does this mean in the industry? If we look what happened, for example, in Australia, there is 60% of the dairy farms that used to exist in 1990 are not there anymore. But the average herd size has increased by 160%. So it's almost 2.5 times bigger than when it was in 1990. And if we think what's happened to that shed, basically we haven't seen much increase of either size or automation on those sheds. So it's sheds that have been designed for smaller herds of probably lower producing cows or herds, and they are still operating nowadays. So that has put a tremendous amount of pressure on the labor operating these parlors. And when we look at what are the technologies that have been adopted on farm, there was a wide list that the farmers could pick off. And if there is farmers in the audience at the moment, and I can see a couple, you might have answered this survey. I do appreciate that. We provided them with a whole list of technologies and asked them which one had they installed today on farm. Basically, 70% of farms that answered this survey had cup removers, 60% of them had computers or herd management softwares, 43% of them had either milk plant wash systems or automatic vat wash systems. Almost 40% of them had in-parlor feeding, and 35% had electronic cow ID. And what we tend to see is that rotary sheds have more technology than herringbones. So we asked the farmers, okay, what are the technologies that you have? So this is what they have basically. But then we asked them, which of these technologies, and we gave them again a list, do you see they will have an expected increased adoption in the next 10 years? And what we see is that 80% of the farmers think that technologies that automate heat detection are going to have an increased adoption. Almost 80% will install automatic sorting gates. Almost 67% would install mastitis detection tools. Almost 60% would install automatic milking system or robotic milking systems, and almost 60% of them would install inline milk meters or devices that measure milk per cow per milking. And again, what we tend to see is that rotary sheds had an expected more technology adoption than herringbones. What I tend to think is that rotary sheds are generally cater for larger herd sizes than herringbone dairies. So therefore, the pressure or the challenges that these farmers face is larger than the one that smaller farms tend to face. So they tend to have more technology, and they tend to expect more technology as we move forward. So what happened in New Zealand? In New Zealand, they collected 500 responses across, again, every farm size, and they tended to see that rotaries had larger herd size than herringbones, so almost 600 versus 300. And they roughly, of the 500 responses, they could roughly get 50-50%. So 50% herringbones, 50% rotary sheds. What they tended to see is that around 50% of the dairies were built in the last 18 years, and roughly 40% of the herringbones and 75% of the rotary dairies did not have any upgrade in the last 10 years. So this is exactly the same pattern that we saw in the survey that we conducted in Australia. So basically, there was old sheds with no much upgrade in the last couple of years that were probably catered for smaller herds and smaller producing herds. So the pressure on these farmers and farm staff is huge. So regarding technology, what are the 5 technologies that are currently being adopted on farm in New Zealand? Roughly 40% of the surveyed farms had electronic cow ID. Almost a third of the farms had automatic in-parlor feeding, or feeding in the shed. Almost 30% of the dairies or the participants had cup removers. Almost 30% of the farms had automatic teat spraying, and almost 15% of the sheds had automatic sorting gates. And again, the same that we saw in New Zealand, rotary farms had more technologies than herringbone farms. In New Zealand, we didn't ask them the survey did not address what technologies did the farmers expect that would have an increased adoption. The question was a bit different, was which technology do you want moving into the future? So it's kind of the same pattern, but a different type of question. Number one was automatic sorting gates. Almost 40% of the respondents said that they would like automatic sorting gates. 21% said that they would like automatic cup removers. 20% said that they would like automatic teeth spraying. 20% mastitis detection tools, and 11% inline milk meters. So again, I tend to think, and I'm sorry, that Rotaries wanted more data capturing technologies than automation capture technologies. So if we remember those original things that technologies could do, it's not replacing human labor. Rotaries were more interested in capturing information or data on farm. But basically we tend to think the same. The technologies that farmers want into the future is addressing that pressure on larger herds and herds that are producing more milk and the pressure of attracting and retaining staff on farm. So as a summary, what do we see as the current status of technology? Basically, we see in both countries old dairy parlors with little recent upgrade. This provides a huge challenge for owners and managers and even operators on farm. We tend to see that the large proportion of technologies that are adopted on farms today are automation technologies aimed at labor saving. So when we look for things like cup removers or sorting gates or automatic in-parlor feeding, are technologies that replace human labor. We tend to see low use of data capturing devices like, for example, milk meters or heat detection systems or weighing systems. And we tend to see high level of technologies on rotary dairies. So what do we think about the future status of technology? Basically, there was technology aimed at managing larger herds, improving reproductive performance, and improving milk quality or animal welfare. These are the main concerns that dairy farmers both in Australia and New Zealand are facing, and they're looking at technology as a way of addressing those pressures or those issues on farm. Then we see an interest in collecting data for decision making. But what I say is that we need to be able to transform that data into actual insights or information. We tend to see rotary sheds more inclined towards technology than herringbones. But again, my perception is that it can be biased or the result can be explained by rotary sheds having in general larger herds than herringbones, and therefore the pressure on labor and amount of size of the herd is larger than the one that we could see in herringbones. And that we also see a high possible adoption of AMS or robotic milking in Australia. So we tend to see that they see in robotic milking an option to address the issues on farm that they have today. So where could the future research, development, extension, and education investments be placed as we move forward? Number one, I think, is the integration of technologies on farm. Farmers need a dashboard or a system where they can bring together all those technologies, integrate technologies, and help them take better decisions. Farmers do not want multiple softwares running on their computer and they having to enter the results or input data or analyze results on different software. They want to be able to integrate technologies, bring all that data together and get better insight of that information. I think there is a huge amount of work to be done on transforming that raw data into actual information, because it is the information what is important for me. It's that information that will enable better decisions on farm. So I think we will see a huge amount of data analytics or decision support tools being incorporated on farm to improve the on-farm decisions. And one example of that is, I don't know how many of you would be aware, but I'm coordinating the Australian AMS KPI project where we are monitoring 9 farms, 9 robotic farms on a monthly basis to be able to understand how they behave, but also provide them some insight to improve their management. And what we've seen is that by analyzing that reports and providing insights of what the data means, they are seeing a value that they get from participating in this project. So that's an example that the data by itself doesn't enable better decisions and therefore does not allow farmers to be either more profitable or more productive or more sustainable. And the other thing that we need to do is understand the potential and the challenges of the different technologies. Technologies will have an impact on farm, so we need to understand how can the adoption of technologies impact farmers and the way farmers interact with cows, plants, soil, and between farmers. So as a conclusion, there is enormous challenges in the dairy industry, and those challenges will only keep on growing, so they won't disappear. Farmers are seeing an active adoption of technology, and they're looking at technology as a way to address those issues on farm and be able to address those pressures and be more sustainable moving into the future. There is a significant potential for increased uptake of technology, but we need to be careful of the impact that this is going to have on farm and off farm. There's a difference between labor-saving technologies and decision-making technologies, and this survey has kind of highlighted one of the thoughts that I've had for some time, that we're seeing a shift from labor-saving technologies to decision-making technologies, and larger herds are going to have probably a combination of both. We need to work a lot and hard on the integration of technologies, but more important than that, the integration of data from different technologies and the transformation of that data into useful information that is easy to access and easy to interpret for decision making. So it's not the data that will enable better decisions, it's knowing what to do with that data through actual information that will make farmers more productive or more profitable. Otherwise, we won't see a change in what happens on farm. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to open the panel for questions if you want. I'll unmute you. So if anybody wants to make a question, you're able to ask it loud. Otherwise, just feel free to enter in your chat box the question, and I will address that question without disclosing who you are. So you've all been unmuted if anybody wants to ask any particular question about the survey or any comment of anything that you see on farm or anything you would like to comment related to this topic. Anybody interested in making any question? Okay, if there's no other question, I would really like to thank you for joining this webinar today. All these webinars are being recorded, and for more information, I encourage all of you to visit the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries website. There you will be able to access a lot of tools and resources about the dairy industry. There is a specific section within the website that is on robotic milking systems. It includes a lot of information, not only on robotic milking, but also on precision dairy farming as a whole. And you can access a recording of this and previous webinars there, so just feel free to access it. We also run a newsletter, so if anybody's interested in the newsletter, just feel free to flick me an email and I can include you in there, but there's a lot of tools and resources in that website. So once again, thank you very much for joining today, and I hope to see you next time we run one of these webinars. Thank you very much.